Hi guys, it's been a while, so I just want to do another one of the commentaries on the latest UFC event that we just had this weekend. So that's UFC Fight Night Cejudo versus Dillashaw. Um, Before I do that, just a couple of quick things. So it's 2019 now, so I'm going to dedicate a little bit more time on my MMA formula page and activities, simply because I've had so much going on last year. I had my shoulder surgery to recover from and a bunch of other stuff. So I had to kind of prioritize, and that's why I couldn't really do all that much. So that's pretty much over. So I am going to spend more time creating content for my Facebook page, YouTube channel, and so on. So follow me on those pages. Just look up MMA Formula, and you'll find where I am. So that's said. Looking at the fight, as always, two things. First, I focus on striking mostly because that's what I find is maybe not enough talk about that. Lots of talk about clinch work and ground game, but not that many people who focus on the stand up when it comes to MMA. So that's also what I think is the most spectacular, obviously, and what a lot of people gravitate towards. So that's one thing. And the second, I don't necessarily talk about all the fights in an event. I typically focus on the ones that interest me the most. So I'm just going over my list here of the different ones that I just want to quickly mention. Um, First one is Joanne Calderwood against Arianna Lipsky. Um, not a horrible fight, obviously. Again, the groundwork of Coulter was what made a difference. Uh, if you look at highlight reels of Lipsky, Ariane Lipsky, you'll see that she's quite an aggressive striker. She hits hard. She doesn't. She's not shy. She's not gun shy. She likes to go forward. She doesn't mind being in a little bit of a trade there. But I think this is one of the first times that she encountered somebody who could actually manage that, who could manage her aggression. And this is where you saw that Calderwood actually did quite a decent job in just holding her off when it came to the stand-up part. I'm again not talking about the ground part, but just looking at the way they were striking. What happened, especially near the end of the fight, is what you would see is Lipsky kind of seemed to realize, like, right, I'm not putting her away. I'm not just gonna be able to knock her out, like, and manhandle her like I would do to other people. So that's not working. And it seemed to me that she was getting a little bit doubtful as it came to her striking. She still kept going, so that's fine, but she wasn't really as effective as she could have been. And there were a couple of points that I'd like to address. And the main one is that her willingness to just stand there right in front of Calderwood and bang it out, which, okay, that's a high risk, high reward strategy. It can work real well, or it can backfire tremendously. In this case, it didn't really amount to all that much, in my opinion, when it came to turning the tide in her favor. So Lipsky kind of made a tactical error in that regard, in my opinion. Second point is that when you get into this tendency of just banging it out with somebody and going toe to toe, you're kind of playing a game which is a coin toss. It's either you win everything or you lose everything, but it's not very tactical. It's not very how should I put it, a very smart necessarily way of fighting. It can work. There's fighters who make a career out of that, so I'm not saying it can't work, but it's quite risky. In this case, she again Calderwood did a good job, and one of the things that she did really well was actually making Lipsky kind of pay for just standing there. There were several exchanges in which that it doesn't matter who hits first, but let's say that Calderwood would hit first, and Lipsky tried to counter her, and she just came like a couple inches short, where she just didn't land. The only thing she needed to do to land those shots, because you will look at the timing and her technique selection was quite good, was just take a step forward. That was all she needed to do. But a little bit tricky. There was the threat of the takedown, so that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that just if you get into this mindset of just banging it out and standing in front of somebody, you tend to forget about footwork, creating angles, coming in at an angle, feints and fakes and so on. So I think that's where her inexperience showed a little bit, and Calderwood has a bit more experience, and I think she made quite a bit of progress as a fighter um, compared to her previous fights, in my opinion. So I think in this specific situation, hopefully Lipsky learns from these mistakes or learns from his experience, put it that way, and actually gets better, because I kind of like her as a fighter. I think she can do really well. She has time to grow in her career, so I would very much hope that she gets a more nuanced striking game as opposed to the extremely aggressive one that she has right now. So that was the first fight, and then I'm going to move on. Let me see if I'm not. Oh, right. I skipped one. So that's Alonso Muirfield against Vinicius Moreira. Light heavyweight. As you guys know, I started at light heavyweight, and then when I began competing many years ago, and I'm heavyweight now. There's this thing that you see in the higher weight classes where a lot of them just don't have really good footwork and tend to rely on their power and strength because it's always there. There's no reason why in MMA this needs to be accepted. There's absolutely zero reason. You can go to many other not only combat sports but sports that have nothing to do with martial arts and fighting, where you see heavyweights be in great shape, have tremendous footwork, great technique, and so on. So it's entirely possible. However, as a heavyweight, it's very easy to rely on your maths, your strength, and so on. And also, you have this knowledge that with that weight that you have and the strength that you have, even if you're dead tired, you can just knock somebody out at the last second. And I'm looking at Derek Lewis there, for instance. So it's a very different mindset from the lighter weight classes, which is what people often forget. When you're a heavyweight, things are different. So this was a little bit of a typical fight where I think Muirfield did quite a good job. So I kind of like, again, I think he has room to grow. He did some interesting stuff with footwork that I thought showed some real promise. But Barrera just was like this lumbering guy who was walking all over the place, and footwork wasn't great, techniques weren't all that great. Seemed a bit out of his element, and made a bunch of well, he wasn't really all that active when it came to stand up. And Muirfield kind of put the pressure on him early on, obviously, with that, starting right out of the gate, storming in. The point that I want to make is that, again, that's why I pick these fights, because there's always something very specific. When you look at the entire fight, what you'll see is that Barrera does the spinning back kick several times. And when he gets knocked down and then, stopped, it's because of the spinning back kick. Now, the reason, in my opinion, why he got countered is because, and I looked back at it just to make sure, is that he has a technical flaw in his spinning back kick, meaning that he spins and then he fires the leg backwards, but he doesn't look over his shoulder. So he's pretty much turning his head away from his opponent, kicks into the void. He doesn't know where that's going to land, puts his foot down, and then he turns. I think this is a technical mistake. What is a better way of doing the spinning back kick is that as you turn, you look over your shoulder. You can dip your head and you can look out of the corner of one eye if need be, if you can't turn far enough or turn far fast enough, let's put it that way. You can still do that and still see if it's there or not. Which means that in some cases, you might actually pull the spinning back kick so you don't throw it because the guy's already moved. Or at the very least, as you throw it, and if you're going fast, that's definitely important, that as you throw it, you're reacquiring the target to make it more precise a technique, and at the same time it helps with recovery. That as you look over your shoulder, you throw the spinning back kick, you put your foot down, and you decide what to do next. Bunch of things you could do. You could spin like Barrera did and come back into your on guard position. If you hit the guy hard and into the stomach or the chest, then he backs up. Like if you look, crap, I'm blanking out on his name now. Really great guy. I think it's middleweight. Blanking out. Anyway, he did a really great spinning back kick in his previous fight. And the Edson Barbosa. Okay. took a while to get the name right. Last fight that Edson Barbosa did, he did this tremendous spinning back kick and just backed the guy up. If you can do that, then it doesn't really matter how you exit from that spinning back kick. What you can do is just do the spinning back kick, put your foot down, and look at the guy and drop your guard, because the distance has increased, so there's no way he can counter you. With a spinning back kick specifically, you feel the guy backing up or not, or your foot glancing off the target and so on as you throw the kick. So you have that immediate feedback on your technique, which is going to tell you what you can safely do next. If you do the spinning back kick and you just feel that the guy is getting knocked on his ass, so to speak, he's getting knocked away from you, then you can just surely spin through and pivot and take your time or follow up, whatever you want to do. If it's not the case, if like in this case you totally miss, you really need to know where your opponent is, because what Muirfield did is that he stepped off towards his left, away from where the kick was coming from, and closed the distance. Now, if Barrera had just looked over his shoulder, he would have spotted that very soon, very early, and then he would have perhaps shelled up quicker or done something completely different. But as is, he made the critical mistake of doing the spinning kick and keeping his eyes just looking straight away from the opponent. So that would be if the opponent is at 12 o'clock, he was looking at 6 o'clock as he was throwing the kick. And when the kick finishes, then he looks. You try to, every time you do a spinning technique, you want to minimize the time that you spend not having eye contact with the target. You need to be able to see the target as quickly as possible, because who knows what he's going to do. Like in this case, Muirfield stepped offline, and that was it. He countered, and the fight was over. So, and what I mentioned before, there's absolutely zero reason why heavyweights would not be able to do this. There's zero reason. This is purely a technical matter. It has nothing to do with weight. Has nothing to do with that you get tired quicker because you've got a lot of muscle mass. It has nothing to do with that. This is purely a technical matter. It's you fix this in training. You learn this in training and you drill it so you do your techniques correctly. It's the same thing as if you are working on your grappling, and that if before you try whatever a kimura or whatever technique you want to do, you need to have the positioning first. You don't just brute strength it. You can, but so much that can go wrong with that. And if the guy is equally strong as you should expect in a matchup, then the chances of you securing that joint lock is actually they're quite low. So why wouldn't we? And you wouldn't do that in BJJ. You wouldn't say like, right, okay, so when you go for that kimura, it just doesn't really matter how you control the guy. Just crank it really hard, really fast. It's going to be fine. Sure, it could work, but the odds are good because the guy also trains is that he's going to be able to escape and make your life more difficult, and then you fail at that technique. So why would it be any different in striking? That is my point. Now, moving on to the next one, obviously Donald Cerrone against Alexander Hernandez. I was a little bit afraid to see what Cerrone was going to do because he's been knocked out a few times and has taken some damage. He's, I think, 35 or 36 now. So he's coming to the last few years of his career, I hope. Because it's my belief that competitive fighters, when it comes to MMA, 35, maximum of 30, and then you should hang up your gloves because it's a rough sport. And nobody wants to see, really good fighters end up getting just beaten to bloody pulp. Nobody wants to see that. Well, I don't want to see that. And I'd hope very few people would, but I'm sure the casual MMA fans would love that. But so I was a little bit fearful of what would happen, but Cerrone, despite a difficult start, he got tagged very early on by one of Hernandez's this kind of long looping uppercut type thing, a little bit awkward of a punch, but it landed, and looked like Cerrone was a little bit doubtful, like what am I going to do with this, but then he kind of found his stride, and one of the things he did really well in this fight is that he managed distance. So Hernandez is a very aggressive guy. He likes to come forward, he likes to pressure, which he did effectively quite a few times. But because if you look at the fight, you see that he tags Donald a few times, clean, just good placed, well-timed shots. Cerrone just rode that out and tried to manage the distance with footwork. And that is a key point that I wanted to mention, is that he used good footwork. He used step drag footwork to create distance and pretty much force Hernandez to rush in, which left him open to counters, obviously, or at the same time stop moving backwards and then explode forwards if he wanted to, or catch Hernandez on the way in. So that is something he did quite well. Again, he's a very experienced guy. I think he said after the fight that his 40th fight with the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a very, very experienced fighter in the octagon right there. What Hernandez obviously is 10 years younger, so he has a lot less experience, and you can see that in the way that he rushed forward, using up a lot of energy and not necessarily getting a great result. And because of Cerrone always backpedaling carefully, not running backwards, but maintaining his stance, maintaining his fighting stance, which means that he maintains the ability to counter or to block or to whatever he wants, because he's not out of position. The result of that is that Hernandez ran into a lot of techniques, and in particularly after the first round, he ran into a couple of straight right knees that he got spiked upon, and that apparently took its toll as well. Did a couple of them that you could see that Hernandez was having trouble just digesting that knee to the body. What happened then is that Cerrone did an excellent job of switching over to a more aggressive style. So from the kind of luring Hernandez in his distance and then punishing him when he came close, he went to a more aggressive style. He has a really good Muay Thai clinch. Cerrone had that for a long time. He has this awkward combination of unorthodox techniques that go with it. And that is one of the keys to what makes him effective, because the timings are always a little bit different. He's a tall guy, so he's got a good reach. He's flexible. He kicks well. As you saw in the beginning of the fight, he's quite good on the ground. He doesn't go there as often, but he's quite skilled. He's a skilled grappler, and many people underestimate his grappling skill. And that is one of the reasons why you can see that he can fight the way he fights in his stand-up, because I don't think he's afraid of going to the ground, not at all. His previous fight, he won by armbar from the bottom, so he knows what he's doing there. So he can be comfortable, maybe taking a little bit more risks with his stand-up, and being a little bit more fluid and dangerous that way. And if he does go to the ground, I don't think he's all that worried of what he can do there. So what I meant with the previous comment is that he's got relatively, I wouldn't say traditional Muay Thai clinch work, but it's close to that. You can see that's very similar to the Thai clinch, obviously adapted for MMA, but it's similar to that style. He did a couple of braced elbows, which were quite well. The knees were good, and so on. Now, mixed with that are a few very, very unorthodox techniques. So the first one is the running straight punches. They're not even shifting straight punches. Shifting straight punches when, let's say that my left leg is forward, I am going to throw a left straight punch, but at the same time I'm stepping forward with my right foot. So I'm taking a full step forward with my back leg as I throw the left straight punch. That is a shifting step, because you shift stances. Now, the next evolution of that is running punches, which is pretty much what Cerrone did. He was almost running forward. He was dropping his weight into his lead leg as the punch landed. So if he took a running step forward with his right foot, he threw a left punch, and vice versa. So this is something that you can see in traditional martial arts as well, but it's quite effective, especially if you're a tall guy with good range. And he can develop quite a bit of speed. Now, at the same time, he doesn't just do one punch; he does 3, 4, or whatever. But he uses those kind of running punches to create quite a bit of pressure. For a guy who has this very solid clinch game for striking, that's quite unusual. You often see guys who like to clinch, who are good at the clinch, kind of stay there and try to find a more rooted position, or try to find a more stable clinch so they can work there. And Donald seems to be quite okay with all of a sudden letting that go and then rushing the guy as he runs after him, throwing one straight punch after another. So that is one aspect of the unorthodox way of fighting he has. And the other one is his roundhouse kick, in particular his high kick. But he does this with a leg kick as well. He also does it in this fight against Hernandez. So what you can see is that he has this blend of both Muay Thai and more traditional versions of the round kick. What he does is that, not always, but most of the time what he does is that he starts the kick by using his hips in the way that Muay Thai fighters do. So a lot of hip rotation, a lot of torque that he creates. And then the kick is extremely similar to Muay Thai up until the point where it lands. You can see this in the last kick that it threw, where where Hernandez just blocks with one hand and still is pretty much dazed. Is that you see that he lands the kick, so his ankle lands, and then he retracts the leg. Now, what you typically do in a more Muay Thai oriented technique is that you would rotate your hip forward to land, and then you rotate your hip back to retract the entire leg. What Cerrone does is he rotates his hip forward like that, but when he impacts, he then bends his knee and brings the lower leg back. And and he does it in such a particular way that you can almost see his heel touching his butt when he folds it back all the way. So that is more of a snapping motion. But the first part is not a snap kick. That's what makes it so interesting. The way that he does that kick is that the first part is like generating a lot of power. And then if he were to use a Thai style more, he would rotate his hips backwards. That would increase actually the power because of the rebound effect that you create. But what he does is then, and that would take quite a bit of time, relatively speaking, to put your foot back on the ground. It also forces you back. Now, what he does with the retraction of the lower leg by quickly snapping the knee closed and pulling the leg in, is that it makes the last part of his technique that much quicker. So let's say that you've got two parts in the roundhouse kick. One, bringing your leg forward, hitting the target. Two, putting your leg back down again. Different ways you can do that. I just explained the Muay Thai version. In a more traditional, let's say karate, kung fu, taekwondo, and so on, roundhouse kick, what you would do is that you would rotate your hips forward by bending the knee fully, which you don't do in Muay Thai. Well, typically you won't do that. You bend the knee and then you snap the kick in and out. So you rotate your hips forward, you raise the knee for the high kick like Cerrone does, and then instead of throwing a half extended leg already, you would fully bend the knee, whip the foot forward, hit the target, snap the foot back again, which gives you that bent knee position again, and then you quickly put it down. Forward, backwards, left, right, doesn't matter. But you retract it that way. So it's more knee driven as opposed to hip driven. I am oversimplifying to make a point. The purists among you will disagree, which is fine, but I'm pointing out something very specific. The reason why I mentioned that is because that allows Cerrone to have a great compromise between speed and precision and power. The Muay Thai high kick, the way you typically would see it in Muay Thai, is extremely powerful. Yes, it's fast and so on, but it's mainly a lot of power. But it takes, relatively speaking, quite a bit of time to retract that kick and put it back down again. Whereas the traditional roundhouse kick from those traditional arts I mentioned would have a little bit less power, or a lot less depending on how good you are, but it would be a lot quicker. And it would be more easy to be precise with, because you're not trying to hit all the way through, you're really hitting more into a target. You're using a different kind of impact. You're not using penetrating impact like in Muay Thai, you're using either whiplash, either rebounding impact, or you're using fragmenting impact, which is what Cerrone does. He uses fragmenting impact. Now, the result of that is that you can more quickly go into another technique. You can more quickly recover that technique, that foot, and put it on the ground again. And that is what makes Cerrone very dangerous, is that he's very skilled at that. So he's got a good compromise between generate quite a bit of power, and once he lands the kick, in being very fast in putting his foot back on the ground, which means that you can't just counter him, and he can, if he at his choice, go forward and come at you some more, or he can retract that leg anyway, put his foot down and step away from you. So I wouldn't say this is this isn't the perfect way to do the kick. There is no such thing. There's only variations and specialized versions of whatever technique you like to talk about, and then you have to make it fit for the fighter. But in this case, it works quite well with Cerrone's game. And Cerrone is consistent in the way he throws it. Every now and then he does it differently, but more often than not, you see him use his roundhouse kick in the exact way as I described. I'm forgetting which round it is, but there is one instance in which he throws the leg kick like that, which typically you never do with the leg kick because it lacks power. And I kind of agree with that point of view, is that by rotating the hip forward for the leg kick, landing, and then pulling the leg back and snapping it backwards from the knee, I think that lacks quite a bit of power. But he wasn't really trying to land the leg kick all that often. It was just a preparation for the body and the high kick. So in the tactical sense, or in the strategic sense, okay, it's fine. But I would never recommend anybody throwing leg kicks like that because they just simply lack power, even if you're strong like he is. So that was something I wanted to point out specifically. And then obviously always, he finishes well. So he once he saw that Hernandez was dazed from that high kick, he just went straight after him and finished it. So good on him. I hope the fight with Conor happens. He called out Conor McGregor. I hope it happens. Not quite sure if it's going to happen. I think McGregor is in a special place in his career, and we'll see what happens with him. But that would be an interesting fight. That would really be an interesting fight because if I'm not mistaken, he's taller than McGregor, and McGregor has problems with people who are taller than him. He also seems to have problems with people who are willing to trade with him and can actually take some of his shots and don't just back up. So we'll see if that happens. A final thing that I want to mention, and this becomes relevant when I talk about Dillashaw versus Cejudo. Look at the way that Hernandez blocked that last high kick, the one that dazed him and almost knocked him out. So he puts up his lead hand and catches it on the hand, and just the whole impact travels through the skull and rattles him. This is one of the main differences that you see with different fighting arts. For instance, in Muay Thai, it's not uncommon, I wouldn't say it's always the case, but it's not uncommon to just block a high kick like that with just one arm. Their stance is different and so on, there's technical differences, but it's not uncommon. In MMA, you cannot risk that because we don't have big gloves. And that means that you can't catch part of the impact and absorb it with the glove. Doesn't work. They're too thin. So you need a double block for high kicks to be sure. And that is one of the reasons why you still see a lot of head kick knockouts, even if somebody gets one hand high enough to block, so to speak, because it's not enough. It's just simply not enough. The small gloves makes a huge difference compared to the big gloves you see in Muay Thai and kickboxing. So that is the last thing I want to say about that. And then the last point is Cejudo versus DJ Dillashaw, much anticipated fight. Thought it was interesting. Let me say up front that I think the stopping of the contest was justified, and I'll explain that in a bit. It's a short fight, and I watched it in slow motion repeatedly afterwards. One of the things that you can look up the slow motions there. There's a bunch of websites and media outlets that show the slow mo of the end of the fight, so you can find it easily. And there's a bunch of stuff that you can see. First off, I really liked how Cejudo started the fight. He came rushing forward. He immediately met TJ in the middle of the ring, or the octagon, and TJ did his typical thing that he likes to do. He kind of looms over you. So what he does, he takes a relatively large stance with the knees relatively extended, and then he leans forward either to the left or to the right. Doesn't often lean straight forward, but he leans forward. So he's giving you this kind of looming posture, threatening and so on. And you don't quite know what you could do with that right away because it's a trap. Obviously he has something prepared. Now what Cejudo did really well is that he immediately did a roundhouse kick to the body and followed that with a right straight as he was retracting his leg. and he zipped in. He darted in at a quite impressive speed, and he caught TJ clean with both techniques. Again, watch the fight again, and you'll see it in the first few seconds of the fight. He just comes in right away, right body kick to the ribs, and immediately a right straight punch. Now they don't necessarily do a lot of damage, but it puts TJ on guard right away. Like, okay, this guy's fast, and I don't want to keep getting hit by this guy, because that's not going to end well. And TJ immediately he backs up a little bit and so on. So that's the first thing. What you'll notice then is that TJ will again do his footwork again, and you can see that he does a little bit of a shuffle, side steps to the left, comes back to the right, and so on. But he goes back to that threatening, looming, forward-leaning posture. That's one of his staples. He works off of that posture. Because it's a little bit unorthodox. But after a while, people get used to that kind of thing, and they can spot it, and they can use it to time you and your techniques, or to use it against you at the very least, which is what Cejudo did here. There was TJ then coming in with the right hand, which missed, and Cejudo just very cleverly just pushed him straight into the line of emptiness, or where he's the weakness in his stance, and just like off balance. TJ was clearly off balance. Now, when you saw what happened next, is that Cejudo immediately stepped in and threw a right high kick. What I just mentioned, TJ does a double block, perfect, and he doesn't get hit hard. Sure, there's still some of the shockwave coming through, but it was not as rattled as you saw Hernandez be. Again, technical details matter. Just to point out, it's been a while. I think it's a year or two ago where I saw a fight. Can't remember where it was. I think it was on Access TV. Not quite sure anymore. But where there's a guy doing a one-hand block against a high kick in MMA, and the shin bone of the guy just broke the forearm in half. So the guy blocks with one hand, and it's not enough. He ended up with a broken forearm, because, I mean, everybody knows by now that the shin bone is quite hard, and if you kick baseball bats, we've all seen those kinds of demos. So it's not that you don't know that kind of hurts, right? So and in that fight, what you saw is that the guy just very smart, gets the guard up in time, but it's not enough. And the angle of the kick was such that it impacted quite well on the forearm, and the kick just snapped the guy's forearm in half. It just totally messed up. Fight's done. So and when you see TJ then doing a really beautiful double hand block against a high kick, again, there's no reason why you can't learn that. There's no reason why you can't make that the default defense against a high kick. Now, I'm not saying it's the only defense against a high kick, but if you're going to block, for God's sake, use two hands if you can. If you can't, okay, it happens. Stuff happens in a fight, but please, oh please, try to make that happen, because it's going to make your life a lot better. Now, what's really interesting, moving on with the fight, is that Cejudo then followed up as TJ circled away from him, and he clipped him with this right hand that seemed not quite sure if it's the back of the head, the side of the head, or the temple area, the ear. It was a little bit hard to see, even on the replay from different angles. But he clipped him. TJ goes down. If you look at the next second or two of what happens after he takes that right hand, he ends up just with his face on the floor, on his elbows. He dropped down. It wasn't a full knockout, but that was a knockdown for sure. Cejudo swarms in and just lands 5, 6, 7, I think, unanswered punches. TJ's trying to move, but he doesn't block anything, and he hits them all. There's a scramble that starts, and what you see then is that TJ gets dropped again, second time. But because of the way that he falls, and he's got his knees inward and his feet out, and his shin bones outwards, kind of like this weird stretch position that you see people sometimes do, that's how he dropped down. So that meant that his body didn't fall all the way down, his head didn't go low, but it kind of collapsed into his own structure, into his own body, kind of collapsed in a heap. And it didn't look like he was falling down. I think a lot of people missed that. But that is actually, in my opinion, the second time he got knocked down. Cejudo kept on striking, and then he hit him cleanly, and TJ went down again. He fell completely down, and on the way down, he took another shot. You can see that his head rocks back a little bit. So there's 3 knockdowns, clearly 3 knockdowns. The second one is hard to spot because of the way that he fell. But if you look at the video very, very carefully, you will spot that second knockdown. TJ recovered. That's not it, but he did fall down. So if you have a guy and you see him get knocked down 3 times in a row, it's kind of, in my opinion, a valid stoppage then. Now, I understand TJ is not going to admit to that. I understand the people who say, well, they should let it go a little bit longer. I understand those kind of sentiments. I don't agree with them necessarily, but I understand the point people make. At this stage, I think we know enough about the damage that fighters get from all the head trauma, that if you see a guy getting knocked down at least twice already, even if you disagree about that it's 3 times, I would say you're wrong. But again, look at the slow motion footage if you need to. But it's a clear second knockdown as well. If that happens, maybe it's time to stop the fight. You don't want to have people take damage that is unnecessary. And then it's up to speculation. Let's say that if the fight would have continued, would TJ have been able to recover? He was going for a single leg takedown, trying to grab the leg of Cejudo. Well, we will never know. But I'm of the opinion that he was, first of all, weakened. Second, Cejudo was doing a quite effective job in controlling TJ on the floor and scrambling around him so he could land strikes. And I'm quite confident that if it would have gone on for 5, 6, 10 more seconds, that TJ would have been out. I don't think he was very effective in defending him anymore. If you are not sure about that, I would suggest watch the fight again and count the number of times Cejudo lands a fist on TJ's head or into his face. It's quite a number of times. So what we know of the way that knockouts work is that if you take a knockdown like TJ did, gets that right hand, hits back of the head temple, I don't know, he goes down, and then he tries to recover. Every small impact that Henry threw and that landed on TJ's head or in his face and snapped his chin or rattled his brain a little bit more adds to the damage and gets you closer to an actual full knockout. So we know that that's how it works. Well, given the number of strikes he takes that way, I would say that it's not unreasonable to say that he was probably going to get knocked out. For sure, he wasn't winning. That's the least we can say. So that was what I wanted to say about that fight. Overall, I like the card. Some good stuff, some bad stuff. Yes, the illegal knee, I'm not even going to go into that. That's just like, it's clear nice day. Some interesting fights. We'll see what happens next. We'll see what Cejudo does. Is he going to give an immediate rematch to TJ? I would be up for that. I think that would be interesting. Donald Cerrone, definitely would like to see him fight Conor McGregor. That would be interesting. What's Lipsky going to do next? Be interesting to see that too, because she's an up-and-coming fighter, a lot of potential. So lots of interesting results here, both from people who lost and people who won. We'll see where it goes. That's it from me. So again, guys, go to any place on social media where you just type in MMA Formula. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You'll find me there. I have a bunch of plans for this year. I have so much other work to do, so that's what makes it difficult. But I try to put out a video or two, once or twice a week if I can, and then do longer form videos like I'm doing now every now and then. And if you want to support, the work I'm doing there, again, subscribe, like, share, let other people know, and if not, that's okay, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.